right, all you glorious gamers out there. Welcome to the PlayerStoo Podcast, the video game podcast for gamers like you, by gamers like you. You can find PlayerStoo on all the social media, that's Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, the lot. You can also find our written content over at playerstoo.com, that's PLAYERSTOO.com. And if you could take 5 seconds to give us 5 stars over on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts, that really, really helps us out. It does a huge amount for the exposure of the show. And while you're over there, if you could leave us a little review as well, that helps us out even more, and you would be an absolute legend to us. I have also just been informed that you can now review on Spotify as well, so even if you have given us a review, if you could head over to Spotify and give us another one, you know what I mean? Wouldn't hurt. Double legend if you do that. There you go. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, and on with the show. My name is Mark Henderson. With me, as always, Mr. Lewis Camley. How's it going, Lewis? We're still in your gaff.
We are still in my gaff. Yeah, I feel like I'm trapped here now. It's lockdown covered all over again.
I know how I felt.
I'm very well though. It's Burns night tonight. Happy Burns night tonight.
Yeah.
Hope everyone around the world is raising a glass.
Absolutely. Bit of whiskey, haggis, neeps, tatties. Sorted.
But not for us tonight because we're doing this. But another night.
Absolutely. And if you're wondering why we're still here, Apple still haven't sent me my laptop. Apple, please send me a laptop. Please send me the laptop. Please send me the laptop. But Lewis, what have you been playing this week?
Just more Hades, really, to be honest, Mark. It's our PlayAlong game for this month, and
a much longer one than usual.
A much longer one. I've just not had much time again. It's been an oddly busy start to the year, so I've been putting in wee sessions here and there with it. The good thing about Hades is that you can do a run really quickly, so you can actually just, in the small space earlier between messaging you about what our plans for tonight were and eating my dinner, I managed to start a run and get a wee bit through it. So that's what, between the power of how quickly you can boot up a PS5 and how quickly you can get started on a run and just be chomping through things, that's been good. I'll save the majority of my thoughts for our discussion, which should be next week on the game.
Indeed.
And so obviously anyone else that's playing along, let us know what you think, or give us a shout on social media if you've got any questions or whatever. The one thing I want to mention at this point is just the actual experience of playing it. I'm not going to go into characters or story or anything like that. I was really expecting this game to be a sort of propulsive, oh my god, finished that as soon as possible, try and clear the final boss, go. And I've actually been really enjoying something about it that is a lot more like other Supergiant games, which is actually just ticking up the numbers, collecting all the stuff, getting the resources, essentially treating each run like a bit of a farming loop where you go and you try and get I don't actually know what most of the items are called, but the purple kind of currency, and then obviously the money that you can actually get, and the upgrade equipment that you can find along the way. Finding all of that stuff to just kind of flesh out my game world a bit and get more of the abilities and all that kind of stuff. So it's been a different gameplay experience than I was expecting, and obviously you could play it either way, but that's kind of how I've been enjoying it thus far, is kind of, rather than thinking I've got to go and escape from hell, it's kind of more just I'm going to go through, I'm going to get used to these weapons, I'm going to kind of see what different boons do. I've still not cleared it, I've still got a fair bit to go, but I'll get there. How about yourself?
Well, Lewis, as you well know, I have also basically just been playing Hades as well to try and get through it. However, I have cleared it. In actual fact, I've cleared it enough times to have rolled credits, which is... Well, we'll talk about it in the actual show next week when we're properly taking a deep dive into this, but you need to complete it 10 times basically to get the quote-unquote true ending, I suppose, although I know that there's an epilogue beyond that as well, so I don't even know what the true ending is, to be honest. But yeah, I have thoughts on this game. I still have a very difficult relationship with roguelikes, I will say that much. But one thing that this definitely is an incredibly well-made game by a very, very talented bunch of people. I will say that much. I'm really glad that you're enjoying it, to be honest. I'm glad that you're finding solace in that repetitiveness and that you're not seeing it as, oh, I need to get to the end to do this thing. You're just seeing it as, right, we'll just see how far we get. We'll see how much we can collect and we'll put that into your stats. Then the next run will be a wee bit further and a wee bit further and a wee bit further and a wee bit further. We'll put a pin in that until next week, because I may have some comments on my gameplay experience which might have been slightly different to that. Totally. But I think that the way that you're talking about it is great, and it's probably the way that the game was intended to be experienced, which is really good, to be honest, and it's great that you're enjoying it.
Yeah, I would say I'm not playing it in the way that I probably ought to be for completing it in time for next week's discussion, but I just want to make sure that I do enjoy it, because it's a game that I was really looking forward to. I don't want to spoil myself on it trying just to kind of churn it out job, like, you know. But hopefully I'll have quite a bit to say on it next week, and probably some time to play it beyond that.
Definitely, man. Definitely should have started it sooner, but I'm glad you're enjoying it. All right, Lewis, and time for the news. All right, Lewis, news item number 1. It's good that was a nice short little intro there, because we've got loads to talk about, because there's been so many things come out of the Microsoft and Activision deal, Lewis, and I do suspect we'll be talking about the many branching storylines about this for a long, long time. However, starting things off with arguably the biggest prick in all video games, Bobby Kotick, Lewis. Yes, you guessed it. The last time we recorded, I think that we were basically speculating about what was going to be happening with Bobby Kotick after the deal. I think it had just been announced that he would be remaining in place as CEO at Activision until the deal was completed, at least. However, Wall Street Journal sources familiar with the matter have said that Kotick is in fact expected to step down after the deal is complete, which is a very, very good thing. However, what is a bad thing, and I believe that you did bring it up very briefly when we were talking last week, is that Kotick stands to make over $370 million just from the sale alone, and stands to make even more money if he is let go by Microsoft. He is the sole executive to hold change of control protection quotes, which would award him $290 million, over $290 million additionally if he were let go by Microsoft. The actual line is unbelievable, which is, and I quote here again, upon a termination of employment by us, and us I'm assuming is like the board or Microsoft or whoever, without cause or a good reason during 12 months prior following the change of control, Mr. Kotick would receive payments of blah 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 blah, totaling $290 million. I would be shocked if they could not find a good reason to sack him. However, I do think, quite sickeningly, Microsoft will probably have to pay him that amount of money, because to prove that in a court of law is very different to speculation on the internet, and unfortunately incompetence and sexual harassment things is very difficult to prove even at the best of times. And as well, Lewis, just because he's just such a fucking scumbag, just to prove that point even more, it has also been claimed by the Wall Street Journal that to change the narrative around the Activision sexual harassment claims, Kotick considered buying video game publications, and the two that were specifically mentioned were Kotaku and PC Gamer. Neither of them have commented on this, by the way, but he was going to buy Kotaku and PC Gamer. He was going to fucking Rupert Murdoch the whole fucking situation. He was just going to be the news as well. And the reason he was buying this was, of course, so that he could lie about the situation at Activision Blizzard, make it seem lesser than it was. And I quote here again, to attempt to paint Activision Blizzard in a good light during a fucking sexual harassment scandal. I mean, my God, I'll be so glad when this guy is out of video games, because I will never have to fucking speak about him again. Jesus Christ.
Yeah, we long for the day when old Bobby is gone at long last. I think, as you say, it's crazy that we're even considering a world where there isn't a good reason to have fired him that has come up in the last 12 months. I mean, there are so many good reasons that he should have been fired. But I think, as you say, the difficulty of proving this stuff, and just how horrible a court case around this kind of stuff can get, never mind for the actual fucking victims, it's obviously horrible for them, but corporate culture, you know, they don't want to have a slanging match in public around this stuff, and Microsoft certainly won't want that. So I think he will probably be paid off, because you have to think, surely Activision would have considered getting rid of him by now if there wasn't the potential for that to all backfire, and that they would owe him a crazy amount of money anyway. This situation is not good. This was one of my drawbacks from the whole deal, as we talked about it last week. Like, this guy is probably going to walk away from a car crash entirely of his making,
and I reckon very nearly $650 million richer.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, it's fair to assume that he will be gone when the deal is finished, and maybe they will wait a full year to get rid of that kind of clause or whatever else there might be, or maybe they will just get rid of him fairly soon after the merger and pay him off. Who knows? The other thing about that, though, is that it's not just Bobby Kotick. There are many more of these people, and they might not all make the same kind of money.
But the difference is he's the only person with this change of control clause, so they can just get rid of them. Fair enough, they might have to pay them off some small amount of money. Well, I say small amount of money in the context of the $70 billion billion that they've paid
Exactly,
for
yeah.
Activision and the payoff that Bobby Kotick is going to get.
Yeah.
So it'll be small fries compared to that. Probably still an enormous sum of money, but not on that level, because he's set himself up to be the commander-in-chief and someone who cannot be ousted.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He's done it all deliberately. He's set all these rules up so that, again, there was all this stuff about how he would walk away and all that, like if he couldn't quickly fix the problem and all that bullshit.
Well, here he's
you think he was going to be exactly? Well, yeah. Do you honestly think he was going to walk away from nearly 300 million just cause some people out there, some Kotaku guy or some guy who works for Bloomberg said that, oh, he's a bad CEO? Do you think he's going to walk away from 300 million because of that? Is he?
Well, again, like, was his theory about how he would quickly change the company culture simply to
sell it to Microsoft.
Sell it to Microsoft and buy the newspapers or the outlets that are talking negatively about him. I mean, the notion of him buying Kotaku is particularly stomach churning because Kotaku is kind of one of the outlets that's most known, or certainly over the last few years, maybe not right at this moment, but has been most known for challenging this kind of stuff and really making a point about reporting on issues and malpractice and mistreatment within the video game industry. If he bought IGN, that would be one thing, but to buy an outlet that is kind of concerned with social justice is fucking pretty villainous stuff, to be honest.
Very villainous stuff, Lewis. Right, the next thing that we need to talk about, Lewis, is actually Sony, whose share prices fell by nearly 13%, meaning that they dropped 20 billion in market value overnight after the news that Microsoft bought Activision, which is absolutely mad when you think about it, considering it was something that was completely out with their control. However, Phil Spencer has said, of course, and we did mention it last week as well, that they don't want to take communities off of PlayStation. And sources at Bloomberg have said that they expect Microsoft to keep making, quote-unquote, some games available for PlayStation, which I also think that we mentioned last week. Subsequently, PlayStation have now made a statement, also via the Wall Street Journal, saying that we expect Microsoft will abide by contractual agreements and continue to ensure Activision games are multi-platform. Now, obviously, none of us know what contractual agreements in place. The only people that know what contractual agreements in place are Sony and Activision and probably now Microsoft. But what they most definitely aren't is indefinite. And I also strongly suspect it would be something that Microsoft could get out of relatively easily if they wanted to. Like, if they just defaulted on a deal and there was some penalty that they had to pay Sony to default on that deal, they would just do it just to get out of it. Do you know what I mean? If they wanted to, that's nothing to Microsoft, who just spent 70 billion buying Activision. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Like, it wouldn't be a problem. However, and credit to Phil Spencer, he has come out and said this in a tweet.
Had good calls this week with leaders at Sony. I confirmed our intent to honour all existing agreements upon acquisition of Activision Blizzard and our desire to keep Call of Duty on PlayStation. Sony is an important part of our industry and we value our relationship.
Now, while I do give credit to Phil Spencer for saying that publicly, I do think that this statement sounds better than it actually is, because while they are willing to honour the existing agreements, which is good and expected, to be honest with you, we don't know how long those existing agreements last, we don't know how easy it is for Microsoft to get out of them, and while he is saying he wants to keep Call of Duty on PlayStation, I strongly suspect that he means Warzone, and I am still of the opinion that this year's Call of Duty, while the deal hasn't gone through yet, will be a PlayStation game. However, next year's Call of Duty, the next mainline Call of Duty game that comes out in 2023 after the deal is closed, assuming that it does close in June as expected, will be a PlayStation exclusive. I am still of that opinion.
Yeah, I broadly agree with that, to be honest. First of all, some credit to Phil Spencer for saying this, but I think you're right that it's kind of word soup a wee bit, and we heard all of this with the Bethesda.
I'm just sort of glad that he done it for PlayStation fans more than anything, because I just thought it was just like...
Yeah, I don't know though. See, that line, Sony is an important part of our industry, that feels like a stab in the guts, like, you know, not to me, but it's damning with faint praise. I mean, they're not an important part of the industry. Sony is the industry leader, or was until fairly recently, you know what I mean, or in some context. There's something there even embedded in that language, which is him saying we are taking over, we're in charge now.
Yeah, but he's not going to acknowledge Sony as like the industry, no, of course, because he is also a part of that. Yeah, but a huge part of it.
But just it's the way that's said. I mean, it's not the fact that he's acknowledging them, it's that he could have just said we value a relationship with Sony. There's something odd about they're an important part of our industry, i.e. we're not going to kill them because they are important to the industry. But I think, as I said last week as well, Phil Spencer is making some very shrewd and interesting public statements, and
he knows what he's doing.
And this is another one, and this is so similar to the language around the Bethesda deal, which obviously generated hundreds of hours of podcasts from everyone on the internet and reports and articles and speculation. You know, it drove the conversation last year, a lot of what he said about that deal, and this will do the same to an extent. But I think you're right. Like, it either means, and I do agree personally that it means Warzone. I think that that's what this is going to be. I don't see any good reason for them to take Warzone away. There are potential other things it could mean. It could mean because we are going to offer them Game Pass, and so we intend to keep, or we would like to keep Call of Duty on the PlayStation. That's kind of up to PlayStation, and I think we talk about that.
That
more.
narrative has come out a couple of times over the past week, and I think that is absolute bullshit. I don't think that they're going to offer it to PlayStation, and I certainly don't think PlayStation are going to accept it.
I think there's a really interesting conversation within that, but put a pin in that. We'll definitely come back to that at another point. But I think this is the beginning of the end of Activision and Call of Duty being on PlayStation, and people should get used to that pretty soon. I could see that those marketing deals might have longer to run than you're suggesting. I don't imagine Sony would have ever, forgetting this deal, would ever have wanted to be in a position with Call of Duty where they're negotiating that deal year upon year. So if you can say at the start of a generation cycle, you can have exclusive rights to market Call of Duty for the next 8 years for this generation, I think you're more likely to do that deal. However, like you say, if Microsoft can pay $70 billion, they can absolutely pay whatever the get out fee is going to be for that.
Sure.
So,
yeah, definitely.
So all I mean to say is I could see a couple more than just this year still being on it, but the direction of travel is away from PlayStation.
Yeah, definitely. We can definitely agree on that, yes. And then the final thing that I just wanted to talk about around Activision, we talked about it a little bit last week as well, and that there's a chance that this could be blocked by US regulators around the grounds of anti-monopoly and antitrust and things like that. This has sort of materialised as a more real possibility than I was initially thinking, but to be 100% clear, I was 95% sure that this deal was going to go through before, and I'm maybe about 92% sure that it's going to go through now. Do you know what I mean? I'm still very, 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 very certain that this deal will be going through. However, it has already been stated by industry analyst DFS Intelligence that the US government would be looking at this deal very closely. And industry analyst David Cole, who owns DFS Intelligence, told GamesIndustry.biz it might actually be in Microsoft's best interest to keep Call of Duty on PlayStation, at least for the time being. He said, the big issue is if Call of Duty becomes a Microsoft exclusive. Right now, I don't think it will. For one reason, it would be hard to get past regulators if they want to lock the competition out. The reason for this is because Call of Duty is comfortably the most played series on console, being played by 55% of console owners, which is truly, truly ridiculous if you think about it. To put that into context, the next closest is Grand Theft Auto on 41%, Fortnite and Assassin's Creed on 28%, and FIFA on 23%. So that is a truly, truly mammoth number. It really, really is. However, Lewis, is keeping Warzone multi-platform enough? Is that enough to say that Call of Duty is technically multi-platform despite the mainline games only being Xbox exclusives? Because I don't think that there's much doubt now basically that Warzone probably will continue to be on PlayStation. I don't think Microsoft are going to take it off. It's making them a huge amount of money, frankly, and if they're true to their word, then they're not going to try to destroy communities on PlayStation or anything like that. So I'm pretty confident that Warzone will still be on PlayStation. It's the rest of the Call of Duty franchise, it's the mainline Call of Duties that I'm thinking, well, maybe not. You know what I mean? And actually, I'm still very much of the position, no.
Yeah, no,
they will not be.
I think that's it, exactly. Yeah, whether that will be enough for the regulators or not, who can say? I mean, Christ knows. But
I suppose the real question comes down to how much Call of Duty is going to be allowed on PlayStation. Like, that might be what is the stumbling block with regulators, weirdly.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, totally. I mean, and will regulators even grasp the full extent of all of this? You know, if this is kind of American congressional lawmakers, they could be told, oh, Call of Duty Warzone will still be on PlayStation, and they'll be like, okay, done and dusted.
Exactly.
Like,
exactly.
That sounds fine.
That's my problem. Like, you need to have people in place that understand these things, and I strongly suspect the largely old white men that run the United States of America probably don't know the ins and outs of Call of Duty.
Well, exactly, yeah. And so whether that is enough to get it through, who knows? But I think that will be the shape of whatever comes, because there's all sorts of potential as well for Xbox to change how Call of Duty works anyway, and so it could be made to look like a less lucrative part of that business, even though it absolutely will still be the driving
I think
force.
It's probably the most lucrative part of that
definitely
business.
is. But like, well, one of the other potential avenues that we could could talk about, which we don't have time for, is that there's rumours that they might reduce the annualisation of Call of Duty, right?
Yes, there is.
So you tell that to regulators, well, we're keeping this part on PlayStation, and instead of putting out a new game every year, we're going to put a new game out every 2 or 3 years. Suddenly you're like, oh, this doesn't sound like such a big trauma after all. It's fine, we can go ahead with this. But you realise that you make a better game every 2 years and you sell more of it and it's all for you, you know what I mean? So there's, like you say, we will be talking about this for months or years probably ahead and all the ramifications. But yeah, again, if you are a Call of Duty player on PlayStation,
non-Warzone Call of Duty player on PlayStation,
start saving up some money.
Yeah, you need to get a still Series X. Yeah, as you said, Lewis, like we could be talking about the various branching storylines that are coming out of this deal for the entirety of the podcast and probably several podcasts, to be totally honest with you. As you said, there's rumours that Call of Duty is no longer going to be annualised. The fact that employees at Raven Software have started the first gaming union in North America, it seems, which is very, very cool. Not that they're going to be recognised by Activision, which they are trying to do right now. And also, it'll be very interesting to see how Microsoft deals with that situation, because they famously don't get on so well with the unions. The fact that Phil Spencer seems to want Activision Studios to work on a variety of games because they were all just getting funneled into Call of Duty, which is great to hear, and potentially reviving old titles and stuff like that. And Lewis, just a couple of hours ago, as we were compiling the notes for this, Blizzard seemingly have announced a new game. You know what I mean? There's just so many things that are happening around this. We could talk about it for the entirety of the podcast, but Lewis, we must move on. Alright, Lewis, news item number 2. Battlefield 2042 is doing just terribly, Lewis. Even worse than I thought that it was doing, and I knew that it was doing badly. It is currently dropped out of the top 50 games list on Xbox in the US, and it is currently sitting in 44th place here in the UK, which is very low for a game of that caliber, you need to understand, let alone a Battlefield game. To put that into some context, it is now behind games like For Honor and Marvel's Avengers, which is also famously not doing great, and Star Wars Battlefront. And this is a game that's only come out in November, you have to remember. And in the UK, it's even fallen behind games that now have sequels like FIFA 21 and Forza Horizon 4, which is actually quite embarrassing, I think. And although you might be thinking, oh, well, that's just Xbox, on Steam, and according to SteamDB, its 24-hour peak, as we're recording this, in the past 24 hours, was 5,500 players, which is truly plummeted from its launch peak of 105,000 players. So that is really fallen off a cliff. And for a game that's literally just been out, what, little over 2 months, if even?
Yeah, basically, yeah.
And it is also one of the worst reviewed games on Steam, with over 60,000 mostly negative reviews, you know. And the picture on Twitch is also not very good. At the time of recording, it only has 851 viewers, which again, for a game of that caliber, really isn't very good. And just to put that into slightly more context, when I looked it up, it was sitting between RuneScape and My Friend Peppa Pig. So that is what we're dealing with. And only this week they launched a zombie survival mode for the game, which is obviously a totally original idea and definitely wasn't ripped off from Call of Duty in any capacity. But the XP progression was so broken that the new mode basically functioned as an XP farm for every single player in the game and was pulled almost immediately. I think it was actually up for less than 24 hours. It's just catastrophically bad. Senior director Justin Wiebe even admitted on Twitter that the game mode should never have got through their review process. Now it has even been rumoured that EA is considering making some of Battlefield 2042's Portal mode free to play in an attempt to sort of salvage the situation a little bit. That was the mode that allowed you to create a sort of custom game or custom experience within the game by mixing and matching elements from different old Battlefield games, which, to be honest with you, was actually a genuinely cool idea and I think was relatively well received. But Lewis, do you remember when this game came out? It was advertised as like, yeah, this is like the new beginning for the game, etc., etc. It was going to be like the Modern Warfare reboot for Call of Duty. Do you know what I mean? This was to inject like a freshness to the series that, quite frankly, I thought had been dying on its arse for a long time, and I'm sure you probably agree. Yeah. Well, whatever attempt that they have made to reboot this game has clearly, very clearly not worked. And my question to you, Lewis, is when is it okay to let a series die?
I mean, there's no better time than the present if you're
Battlefield, it's now.
Yeah, I mean, God, I could go on about. I mean, I think this about both this and Call of Duty, really, and that's, I've got broader problems with first-person shooters and this whole kind of market. And
well, it's kind of hard to make that argument for Call of Duty when I've just said that it's the most played series on consoles ever. However, Battlefield is not in that situation.
No, exactly. But I'm not saying that you should bin Call of Duty either. I just mean that both franchises, but sticking to Battlefield, they lack inventiveness. It's the same thing again and again. And so, what were their big ideas this time? Put tornadoes in it. Seemed to be the main one from all the trailers I remember. Allow you to
make it massive as well. Have 200 players or something
exactly,
like that at one time. Yeah.
Mix and match stuff from the old games. That's not a great sign. That doesn't really say that you've got any fresh ideas. And steal zombies. Call of Duty have been doing zombies for fucking years now. It's not even like that was a mode that just worked really well for COD last year and you're like, oh, we should get in on this. Like, they've been doing that for like a decade or something.
Yeah, they've been doing that since I've been playing Call of Duty.
So Battlefield just has nothing going for it. It was launched at the wrong time. It was launched with the wrong strategy. They should have.
It was a buggy mess.
It was a buggy mess. They should not have put it out in the same window as Call of Duty and Halo.
Between Call of Duty and Halo.
Yeah, huge mistake. It all stinks basically of EA and DICE thinking that name still matters in a way that it used to. Or if you kind of behave as if it does, then the sales will follow. If we behave like we are still Call of Duty level, then everyone will believe that and they'll buy the game, and that's just not how it works. People aren't so stupid, and there's just so much more to play now, and particularly in that space.
The FPS genre is so saturated.
Between that and the way that splintered off into other kind of versions of that, there's too many games of that nature, and they didn't have a good enough idea, I don't think, this time. It doesn't sound like it's landed with anyone. I mean, even hardcore. I mean, there must still be a hardcore Battlefield community. They're probably
and I think they all hate it.
They're probably
still 60,000 negative reviews on Steam.
There's probably people in that community still playing like Battlefield 4 or whatever. Going back to the early ones, the adored ones. If you can't get them to play this, you're doomed. Because how are you going to convince anyone else to play it?
I have absolutely no idea, man. To be honest with you, I have a sort of thing about long running series, and some of them just need to be put to bed, I feel, honestly. Like, this is one thing I admire about PlayStation, right? And I have many, many, many complaints about PlayStation, right? But one thing that they do is that they just let a series stop, like Uncharted, for example. Do you know what I mean? They could continue making them. I hope that they don't, by the way, because there's rumours that might come back. But they've let that just sort of lie and just be what it is. I know I'm saying that on the cusp of them about to release a master collection of them, right? But I sort of just like that, and then they move on to like a new idea, or like, so everyone's like clamoring for like, oh, let's have Jack and Daxter back as Naughty Dog's next game, and I'm just like, well, they've done that. Let's actually maybe think about new IP, and that's something that I really like about PlayStation, is that they always feel fresh because they're always making new stuff, it feels like. And even with our old IP like God of War, they totally reinvented it and stuff like that. Do you know what I mean? I really like that about them, and they need some of that attitude when it comes to Battlefield, because they need to do something completely different with this series, because what they're doing right now is attempting to copy Call of Duty badly.
It's exactly that. It's a bad copy. It's not going anywhere, and I think you're spot on with that. Even if they don't let it die, let it rest. Take 5 years away from that. Put a small team within DICE onto looking at what first-person shooters are going to look like in 2027, and have them start to develop that so that you're at the cutting edge again. And in the meantime, make some other stuff. You've got plenty of good talent in DICE and plenty of good talent across EA that they could be working on other IP. You could be making smaller games, whatever. Have like a vanguard team that are going to work out what the next big thing in first-person shooters is, and make sure that you're at the launch of that you're the game that creates that. But if you're just going to try and do another one next year, Assassin's Creed proved that this works as well, although they're running themselves into the ground a wee bit with that again. But you can stop, you can reinvent, you can change the narrative around your game, but not like this, not just by making it bigger every time.
No, not like this. Yeah, more isn't always better, and quite frankly, when you've got to the scale of this, more is probably worse. Alright, listen, news item number 3. Sticking with EA, they have just announced 3 new Star Wars games. This includes a sequel to Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, a first-person shooter, and a strategy game, all of which will be worked on by Apex Legends developer Respawn, who are also apparently working on another FPS game as well that isn't a Star Wars FPS. strong rumours that might be Titanfall, but I simply don't know how this studio is doing this, frankly. But they were also responsible for the first Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order as well. The FPS will be headed by Medal of Honor co-creator Peter Hirschman. The strategy game will be produced in collaboration with BitReactor, who are made up of ex-Firaxis devs, Firaxis being responsible for XCOM and the Civ series. I strongly suspect it'll be going down the XCOM road, though, personally. This obviously comes off the back of EA's Star Wars exclusivity deal running out in 2023, and we know that that's not going to be renewed in the manner that it was before, certainly not in exclusive terms, because we now know, of course, that Ubisoft and Quantic Dream, among others, are now making Star Wars games as well. EA have reportedly been planning on reducing their reliance on licensed IP as well, and if you remember, there was also strong rumours that they might not be renewing their license with FIFA either, which would also be absolutely huge. And EA have announced that Motive, one of their other studios, are also making a Star Wars game. So currently they have 4 Star Wars games in the works, despite the fact that their exclusivity license is going to be running out in 2023. Jeff Grubb, however, over at VentureBeat has said that there will be no Battlefront 3, and journalist Tom Henderson, no relation, also claimed in November that DICE pitched a third Battlefield game, but it was rejected by EA due to it being too costly to use the Star Wars license. Jeff Grubb has also claimed that after these 3 Star Wars games, and presumably whatever Motive is making, quotes, EA is done with Star Wars. I'm going to be honest, I'm not sure how much I believe that, to be honest, because it's weird to say that about someone who has currently 4 Star Wars games in the works. However, he did emphasise that they want to be relying more on their IP as well, namely Battlefield, Dead Space, Dragon Age and Mass Effect, which I do definitely believe. But if they're going to be doing that and they're going to be relying less heavily on licensed IP like Star Wars, like FIFA, like the other sports titles like Madden, they need to sort their fucking shit out, man. They really do. Like, the last non-Respawn, non-Star Wars EA game that was any good is arguably Dragon Age Inquisition, and I didn't even like that, and that came out in 2014. They really need to start making some good fucking games that are out there to be good games, just exist as good games and not just there to fucking peddle microtransactions and probably NFTs fucking soon. They need to get their finger out. Like, fair enough, the Mass Effect collection is done great and by all accounts was really good, but the last Mass Effect mainline game was arguably one of the worst games ever made by people of that franchise. I mean, I never played it, but it was arguably shit. Dead Space as well, you've just left to rot for years and you're trying to bring it back with this remake, which is really exciting, but you've just left it there doing nothing. And Battlefield, we just spoke about how shit that is. You know what I mean? Yeah. They need to have a real think about what they're doing if they're going to get away from this license and stuff, because right now that is their fucking bread and butter.
Oh, it totally is. And I guess this might be the first step towards that. You know, you can't be doing both things necessarily at once. So they've had a 10-year experiment with going down this licensed route and it's not worked at all. Like, it's generally been a disaster, the Star Wars license in EA's hands.
I mean, There's
been one solidly really good game and a couple of like passable ones, I would say. You know,
yeah, the minute Respawn got involved, it got good.
Exactly.
The only good EA studio.
I think the aside from all this, like forgetting about Star Wars for a second, is that EA's reliance on Respawn at the moment is near total, essentially, and it is quite worrying. Like, Vince Zampella seems to be doing about 4 different jobs at once. He's not just the head of Respawn anymore. He got given the Medal of Honor franchise as well, and he's still running Apex. How can one team be doing all of that?
I honestly don't know how one studio is doing all that. But fucking hell, man, like BioWare specifically need to step up here. Like, the next Dragon Age needs to be shit hot.
They need to step up, or EA needs to bring in some other studios with some new ideas, because I mean, I like that idea that they would narrow down and look more at their own IP and try and turn some of them, you know, try and turn Mass Effect ultimately into another sort of Star Wars within the gaming sphere. But at the moment, yeah, you're right, like, you look across their whole slate and you go, I don't know. I mean, there's fan bases for all of this stuff, but there's not necessarily that one, you know, where's their Last of Us? You know what I mean? Where's the thing that you're like, we can hang our whole...
do you know where the Last of Us was? Do you know where that was? That was at the Mass Effect 2, which came out in fucking 2005 or something.
Exactly. It's an interesting time ahead for EA. I think we're reaching Star Wars saturation point, and I wouldn't be sad to see a few less games in the Star Wars mode come out over the next few years, but these ones that have been announced today sound interesting enough, and obviously Jedi Fallen Order was really good, so Respawn know what they're doing. Hopefully that's not too bad, but between that and the Marvel games that we're getting, maybe some less deals with Disney for some big game designers would be welcome at the moment.
Mass Effect 2 came out in 2010. I'll give them a little more credit. I think it was the first Mass Effect which came out. I think that was in 2007. Yeah, 2007. Just checking. No need to tweet me. Alright, Lewis, finishing off as we always do with a couple of shout outs. Shout out number 1, Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six Extraction has finally come out, Lewis. Remember when this game was going to be called Quarantine, but then a global pandemic happened? Those were the days. However, the game seems to be not great with all the will in the world. Currently sitting with a 70 on PC, 74 on PS5 and 73 on Xbox Series X. I think it is safe to say that by Ubisoft's expectations, that is falling pretty below par. It basically seems that they've converted a lot of Siege content into a co-op shooter, which isn't necessarily a problem, but it does seem as though it's pretty unoriginal, pretty uninteresting, and as we were just talking about with Battlefield, entering a very saturated market in the first-person shooter genre, and basically it's not made any impact. It does seem to be a pretty competent co-op shooter, to be honest, but it's just so uninteresting and just failing to stand out. And I really think that this sings on social media a little bit, because I haven't heard a single person talking about it. I haven't heard anyone talking about it at all.
No, there's been no buzz around this game whatsoever. Nothing that Ubisoft seems to have done has created any for months now, it feels like. But yeah, we were saying just off air that even when the reviews dropped, it wasn't even like the big outlets were sharing the reviews very much. You just didn't see it. It was not being spoken about.
Well, the big outlets wouldn't have been sharing it very much because they would be able to see that they're not getting any engagement on those articles.
Exactly.
And therefore, it sort of more speaks to the fact that it just didn't land, man. It just failed to land in every capacity.
You think as well about how a game like Outriders, which reviewed similarly, launched on Game Pass and at least had a big moment for a couple of weeks.
Yeah,
like
sure,
it died a
definitely,
death after that, but this didn't even achieve that. That's not great.
Certainly not. Alright, let's shout out number 2, and far better news, Elden Ring has gone gold. Huzzah! Huzzah! It has also been confirmed by producer Hasuhiro Kitoa at the Taipei Gaming Show. Sorry, I've definitely butchered that name, by the way. That you can complete the game in around 30 hours, it seems, although he has said as well that it could differ significantly from player to player, as you would expect. He has also said that there would be many dozens more hours worth of gameplay on top of that, basically just through exploration and spending time in the world, of course. And he mentioned that it couldn't be completed in a single run. You would need to do multiple playthroughs because there seems to be branching paths at the end. So basically, Lewis, shaping up very much to be an open world game. But Lewis, I have to say, I'm very, very excited that it's gone gold. Man, does this game look fucking good. 30 hours, Lewis, a lot more palatable than the 500 hours we were previously speaking about for Dying Light 2.
Yeah, that's definitely true. I mean, 30 hours is about right for a FromSoft.
Sure, yeah, I'm happy with that.
Plus, with all the additional stuff you can do, I think that's totally fine. There was a wee bit of a storm in a teacup around that, I think, when it was said. But
what, people wanted more?
I think, or people were expecting more, I guess, because it's an open world game, but like...
Nah.
You know.
Honestly, if I'm spending 50 hours in that game, I'm a happy man.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. I think 30 hours for your story is fine, and then if there's more...
Yeah, sure, definitely.
On top of that,
you definitely spend 10 hours doing other
stuff.
Easily,
particularly
definitely.
in a From game where you get battered all the time anyway.
Yeah. Alright, let's shout out number 3. And speaking of Dying Light 2, Dying Light 2 and Life is Strange Remaster have both been delayed on Switch, and both seem to be pretty significant delays very close to release. Life is Strange is coming out on other platforms on February the 1st, but the Switch version has been delayed until quote-unquote later this year, so God knows when that is. And Dying Light 2, which comes out on all other platforms in February the 4th, has been delayed. It looks like at least 6 months, so they said that they were going to try and get it out within 6 months or something like that, but if you're saying 6 months, you must be pretty close to that 6 months, I would have thought. And I honestly think that this is another reason why Switch really need to get a next gen model, because I suspect that the reason that it's always the Switch version that gets delayed is because you would sort of have to develop for the Switch version a bit more separately than all the other, like the PC version and the console versions, you know. I definitely believe that, you know. And this is also compounded by the fact that it's like, these aren't indie games, like these are, well, Life is Strange is sort of arguably in the middle there, but it's double A in my head anyway, and Dying Light 2 is definitely triple A. This is probably the least valuable platform for those games to be on as well, so it's the easiest one to push back all the time. And if you're always the last one to the party as Nintendo, do you know what I mean? That's bad for the sales on your platform, you know? So it's just compounding bad things for the Switch right now, do you know what I mean? I just feel as if the technology and everything has moved on a little bit beyond it, and really Nintendo have to be hyper looking into their next model.
Yeah, for sure, and particularly with the Steam Deck on the horizon again.
Yeah.
You know, if anyone wants to play those games handheld or in a switchable state, you're going to be able to do that. I presume, I don't know that for certain, but I presume you're going to be able to do that on Steam Deck much sooner than it seems like you're going to be able to do it on the Switch. And I think the other interesting thing about that is that at least in the last few years, Nintendo have been trying that streaming model for some of these bigger...
the cloud-based process and stuff.
Exactly, and using that to get around the hardware limitations for games exactly like these, or particularly like Dying Light. I'm a little surprised about Life is Strange, to be honest, but there's another conversation. But whether that means getting that cloud-based system set up for each game takes way longer, that might well be the case.
Sure, that added complication, definitely.
Yeah, it's a shame for people who would want to play it there. They're probably not the right place to play, certainly Dying Light 2 anyway. I think Life is Strange, the original at least, would have been okay on Switch. But
you would have thought so.
But yeah, like if they've polished that up, then maybe not. But yeah, it's not good for Nintendo, as you say, and we'll be talking endlessly, I'm sure, about their next model again and again and
this
again.
And Activision. This will be a year of that.
It's already been about 3 years of talking about the fucking Switch Pro.
Alright, let's final shout out number 4. A weird thing has happened with the PlayStation trophies last night as we record this. All the PlayStation trophies temporarily disappeared overnight and their titles appeared as PS3 titles. Basically, it showed all PlayStation games as having 0% completion. The sort of title card was removed entirely and only the PS3 logo was shown next to them where the PS4 logo should have been. So, Lewis, this obviously on the back of speculation that PS3 games may be coming to PS5 as part of their sort of rejigged subscription service, which is supposed to be taking on Games Pass and including PS Now and PS Plus and all these things. So again, going with the PlayersToo No Smoke Without Fire ethos here, it seems very clear that they're doing something on the back end with PS3 games. Let's hope that this also includes PS1 and PS2 games in some capacity as well, but I think that this is definitely happening, which I actually think is really great news considering how PlayStation have been pretty poor at preserving their back catalogue.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's almost a must at this point for various reasons, but I'm basically just waiting on the announcement now. Like you say, no smoke without fire. There's no way that this isn't going to lead to something, maybe not exactly what we've thought it's going to be, but I would suspect we will hear about this before the end of March as well because of the financial year. I think that they'll probably announce it and possibly even launch it. It's been rumoured for spring, so you're going to want to get that wee boost before the end of the year, particularly when your stock just dropped 20%. So
13%, 20 billion.
Yeah, that's right. Well, it's not a problem then.
Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, I think it's time for a beer and then we'll be back for Topic of the Week. And we are back for Topic of the Week. Topic of the Week this week is the Activision deal the beginning of the end of the PlayStation era, Lewis?
Yep, that is the question that I'm posing to you this week, Mark.
Yes, it is. And just in case you haven't had enough Activision chat, here we are with more.
Yeah, I mean, as we said at the top of the show, this is the topic that's going to rumble on. It's been the biggest topic in gaming this week and will be for many weeks to come. But there was just some stuff that we weren't able to kind of discuss either last week or this week in the news, kind of largely about the impact of this on PlayStation, because, you know, we tend to skew towards PlayStation as gamers, but obviously the ramifications for Xbox and this deal are big, but the ramifications for PlayStation are potentially bigger. And so I've posed, like, understandably an incendiary question there. I'm not actually suggesting for a second that PlayStation is about to die or it's all over or any of that stuff, but since the announcement of this Activision deal, it has been in the back of my head, you know, how does PlayStation respond to this? Can PlayStation respond to this? Are Microsoft and Sony even in the same kind of field here anymore? Are they still playing the same game? There's a lot going on behind the scenes in this deal that I think will have ramifications for PlayStation gamers. So I've got a few questions around all this that we're going to spitball back and forward, and we'll probably revise this week by week as we go forward when every new piece of information about this deal comes to light.
I will not be held to any of the answers that I have in this podcast right now.
But yeah, we'll start in there. I mean, one of the big pieces of conversation around this has been, particularly from that kind of industry analyst side, has been this notion that Microsoft maybe are actually looking more towards how they compete or what their competition is with huge technological megacorps like Facebook, Amazon, Netflix to a lesser extent, and Google. You know, that's this big kind of conglomerate of tech interests. This deal feels like it's pushing Microsoft more towards that area and less about competing directly with the boxes of PlayStation and Nintendo to obviously a different extent anyway. Is that how you see this? Do you see this as a purely gaming division move, or is it a bigger thing than that?
Yeah, so I have also seen this as well, and I know that the guy from DFC Intelligence, that guy David Cole or whatever his name was, also suggested that this deal sort of took Microsoft out of competing with Nintendo and Sony and moved them beyond that. And that Microsoft are looking to a future where they have to be competing not with those companies and instead would be competing with Facebook, Google and Amazon and Netflix and whoever. Much, much bigger companies that have as much power potentially, well, again, maybe Netflix aside, that have as much power as Microsoft do. And this is actually about positioning them for the future rather than taking on Sony and Nintendo now. That, in my head, makes a lot of sense. Just because of the power of those companies, you know, I mean, Apple, throw them in there as well.
Yeah,
why
of
not?
course,
you know?
yeah.
The power of those companies, and that they have been flirting with invading the video game space. Well, Google to a lesser extent, who legitimately tried and failed drastically.
Struck out.
Absolutely, but Google have the resources to just do it again.
Yep.
Like, just try again. You know what I mean? That didn't work. Okay, we'll do this time, you know? Amazon, again, have been on the periphery for a while. Facebook have been on the periphery for potentially even longer, to be honest with you. Apple have also got Apple Arcade and stuff like that and have been sort of flirting with various things. Netflix have recently bought a few gaming studios, you know what I mean? It's all a bit up in the air with that, but basically what I think analysts like these people that we're talking about just now are foreseeing is companies of that scale invading the video game space. And when they do, Sony and Nintendo will be very, very small fry. Microsoft won't be, just because of, again, they are of that scale as well. And they are therefore positioning themselves for that potential invasion happening, and that they, regardless of that, will still be in the strongest position.
Totally. Yeah.
Having said that, I think that this deal obviously does hinder Sony right now as well. Like, it does hurt the biggest, one of the biggest certainly, or almost certainly the biggest third-party game on their platform is now potentially gone. Question mark. Again, we don't really know the ins and outs of what's going to happen there. So yeah, I think it's both. It's like a double-edged sword. It's not just about preparing for the future where they see where they might have to compete with people who have as much money and sway as they do, but is also about competing right now and bolstering Games Pass and forcing your way to the top.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? As they said in their own statement, they are now the third biggest game publisher by revenue after Sony and Tencent now, you know? And they've... I don't want to use words like this because I feel as though it's inflammatory, and I don't really mean it to be inflammatory, but it's sort of like PlayStation sort of over very many years and very many IP sort of quote-unquote earned their way there, whereas as Microsoft bought their way there. Yeah. But at the end of the day, this is all fucking business. I'm not suggesting one way is necessarily better than the other, but that's what they're doing because they can do it. You know
yeah, I mean? Well, exactly. You know? Yeah, I mean, I think that's an interesting way of putting it, and it reminds me of the same thing that has happened in the football world, where you have a club like Liverpool who's been successful for 30 years, who then suddenly can't keep up with your Man Cities and Chelseas until, you know, recently when things have changed. But there's something there about people have a longer term attachment to PlayStation than Xbox, and that's why I sort of phrase that opening question as like the end of the PlayStation era. I'm not saying is this the end of PlayStation, like there won't be a PS6, it's all fucked, it's all over. What I'm kind of saying, I guess, is that are we reaching a point where PlayStation's certainty at the top of the tree, as much as Xbox have been competing and all that, don't get me wrong, but like PlayStation have been, if you're a normal person in the street who's not interested in gaming, you would think of PlayStation in the last 30 years, it would be up there, and maybe in 20 years time that won't be the case so much, because I think the value of this deal, it dwarfs anything that it seems like PlayStation would possibly be capable of doing, and so it sort of
PlayStation,
and so it sort of makes all of their moves from here on look like a completely different business almost. You know, if they buy another indie dev studio for $100 million or $400 million, whatever, it's just nothing in comparison to what Xbox are doing here.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I think that they're both going about it in different ways, because in a lot of ways they have to, or certainly Sony have to go about it in a completely different way to Microsoft, because they don't have the capital to drop 70 million on buying a fucking one of the biggest game publishers in the world. You know what I mean? And to use your football analogy, which I believe we've used before here, is that PlayStation are doing this in a more grassroots way, I suppose, whereas Microsoft are buying
the league.
Lionel Messi. You know what I mean? That's what they're doing. And again, like, it's all business either way. Do you know what I mean? But Microsoft has their way to buy their way to the top in an instant, and Sony doesn't have that. You know?
Yeah.
So if they drop below Microsoft again, like they did, well, arguably, in the PlayStation 3/360 generation, would they be able to ever regain pole position again? Maybe not.
No.
Would Microsoft even allow them to? Because they would be in a position where they would just be like, oh, well, Sony have done this, so we'll do it better. You know what I mean? It'll always be that sort of situation. So I understand that. I don't necessarily think that that's going to happen imminently.
No.
But, I mean, in a 20-year forecast in the future, like, possibly.
Yeah.
Because I said, I think they were still, despite certain hiccups and looking at you fucking Stadia, around the streaming future, like, I'd still genuinely think that probably is where games are going to go, because distributing and making consoles is really, really fucking expensive.
Yeah.
So I actually think that PlayStation and Sony, therefore, might actually just be a publisher at some point and not actually be making a box at all. And I think that sort of Games Pass will be maybe the thing, to be honest.
The majority.
And weirdly, as you were saying around the consoles and the way that they were going, is that Sony might start trending towards being more like Nintendo, and that they are, as you put it, more boutique. You know what I mean? And you buy the PlayStation to play the PlayStation games, as you play the Nintendo, really, you play the Nintendo games, let's be honest. Whereas the dominant force is Game Pass on whatever platform you choose to play on.
Yeah, whatever you happen to have, whatever you can attach a controller to. I think that is the thing. I'm not convinced that Sony or PlayStation could kind of handle any more acquisitions on this scale from Microsoft. You know, just for talking sakes, if Microsoft came and bought EA, I mean, PlayStation would then be facing down the barrel of not having CoD and not having FIFA or Madden, you know, and that's kind of why I'm more concerned about it, not just as a PlayStation fan, but also just as a fan of gaming, that consolidation and centralization could be problematic, because it becomes a lot harder for Sony to produce the top quality first-party games that they do if they're not selling boxes and they're not selling third-party games.
Yeah, definitely.
So there's a big issue there, but one of the ways it's been posited that they could address a lot of this is through Game Pass itself. This age-old question, and we did discuss it when the Bethesda deal was rumbling through, will Game Pass ever come to PlayStation? Is that the answer for PlayStation? And I want to just quickly put to you some tweets by VentureBeat's Jeff Grubb, who said, to me, this seems like the obvious solution. Sony could dictate terms if it comes to the table today, because Microsoft still needs PlayStation 5 more than Sony needs Game Pass, but that could change quickly. Like PS5 being the only console where you can get both PS5 games and Xbox games on day one, that's something that Sony can easily build on while taking at least 30% from Game Pass subscriptions. We were having a bit of a debate just before recording this about this very idea. I can't decide whether I think we are now more or less likely to see Game Pass on PlayStation, because I totally think that what Jeff Grubb says there is smart, but I think for the exact same reasons, Microsoft, who maybe 1 year ago would have been fairly desperate to put Game Pass on PlayStation, might now look at it and think that's not a tactically wise move for us when we can just choke them off, you know?
I don't think it's a tactically wise move necessarily for either, right now anyway. I don't think that Microsoft really want to put Games Pass on PlayStation. I really don't. Despite what all their marketing spiel is, I really don't think that they would want that. They want that on their own consoles, selling their own consoles, and on PC, where they're obviously dominant as well, you know. I don't think PlayStation want to allow Games Pass on PlayStation because they want to do their own thing. Like, they're obviously trying to do whatever it is in the background right now. Are they far too late in doing that? Yes. God, yes. 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 But they still want to be doing their own thing. Like, they're talking about giving a 30% cut to Microsoft there from the subscriptions. Like, PlayStation are looking at that and going, well, why are we giving 30% to Microsoft when we could be doing that 30%?
But they can't, right?
Well, no, they can. They could. But you're saying that, well, Call of Duty's over there and whatever, but at the same time, like, I think that PlayStation have continually, again and again and again, to success, and has of Nintendo, bet on themselves and have bet on their own IP. And Nintendo's still alive and kicking. Nintendo still sells arguably more video games than any of the other two. Do you know what I mean? It's not that that's a bad move. It's not a strategically bad move. However, having said that, I think that as the years plod on, if Microsoft continues to go the way that they're going, then Sony would tend towards being more like Nintendo, would tend towards being more boutique, would tend towards being the console that you played the PlayStation games on, and then Games Pass. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, we're a really interesting point right now, I think, in gaming, because Microsoft really are fucking throwing their weight around here, really are. And when Microsoft throw their weight around, it really puts in perspective the lack of weight everyone else has by comparison.
So that's totally it. By comparison, a lack of weight there. This is all, and this will need to be a discussion for another time because we're rapidly running out of time, but what this all might do and what the trend is towards the future of third-party development, it's going to become harder and harder and harder for major third-party publishers, I think, to exist in the space, because they will be acquired by either side, by Sony or by Microsoft. You can see a future in the not too distant realms where there is kind of only big AAA publishing coming from the platform holders predominantly, maybe one or two other players, and then essentially the indie scale. And that's not the worst thing in the world, because as long as that indie market is still able to thrive. But the reason I kind of jumped in there and said like Sony can't do that isn't really about the infrastructure or whatever. It's that their version of Game Pass, absolutely, if it contains all of the PlayStation first parties and those major games, that will be successful and good. But if it isn't also offering anything like the degree of third-party games, which again, if Game Pass is offering you everything that Activision have been doing, everything that Bethesda have been doing, through partnerships, everything that EA has been putting out, probably Ubisoft, I can't remember if that's on the service now or if it's been rumoured to be on it, but if Microsoft can just make that kind of deal, an exclusive arrangement with EA and Ubisoft to put their games onto Game Pass day and date for 10 years, don't even have to buy them, I worry that PlayStation would be put in a position where they would only have essentially Nintendo Switch Online. And even then, like, the development cycles for Sony's biggest games are so huge that you're talking about getting these games 2 or 3 times a year, which isn't much of a subscription, so then it's like, how do they filter in the indies and all that? This is a huge discussion, but I think it's as you were kind of saying there, it's a huge moment for the industry, and I think that this deal represents potentially a really big turning point. Again, not in this bullshit console war way, I don't really care about it in that sense, and like you say, it's all business. None of us should like root for businesses ultimately.
No one ever should root for businesses.
But like, just our understanding of the gaming landscape and how things have been, I think, is all potentially on the cusp of changing, not because of Activision, but kind of because of what that all represents and what it could mean for the future.
No one should root for businesses of this size, I should say. Some smaller businesses are fine.
Support your local mum and pop shop.
Yeah, they're all right. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I think we'll have to call it a day there. I'd like to remind everyone that you can find PlayersToo on all the social media. That's Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, the lot. You can also find our written content over at PlayersToo.com. That's PLAYERSTOO.com. And if you could take 5 seconds to give us 5 stars over on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts, that really, really helps us out. It does a huge amount for the exposure of the show. And while you're over there, if you could leave us a little review as well, that would really, really help us out, and you would be an absolute legend to us. And you can go and review us on Spotify as well and be a double legend, which is a thing we've just coined just now. I would also like to remind everyone that our play-along game for this month is Hades, which we have already mentioned a couple of times this week and last week, but we will be taking a deep dive into next week as our topic of the week, which I'm very, very excited about. Very interesting discussion, I suspect, ahead, to be honest, but you need to finish it, man.
Yeah. I'm going to explore the outer regions of hell that I've not quite reached yet in the next few days. But yeah, I would rather enjoy it than break my neck trying to finish it.
Fair enough, man, fair enough. I know that this one's a wee bit of a special one. It's one that we've been looking forward to for a while, and we wanted to do it as a play along purely to complete the quadrilogy of Supergiant games. So yeah. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we will see you next week.
Thanks.